My name. Okay, I have to click that we're being recorded. There we go. Welcome, everyone. My name is Christy Simon. I'm the president and CEO of the Central Maryland Chamber. Thanks for joining us this morning for State Procurement 101. We're looking forward to a great program. The Chamber has hosted a number of great webinars over the past year, and they have been recorded and are accessible for free right on our website, which is centralmarylandchamber.org. You can also sign up for our newsletter and follow us on social media for all of the information about the resources we offer, as well as upcoming events. So if you're able, please take a moment and add your contact information in the chat box. Following the event, we will share that with the attendees so you can stay in touch. And also, if you have questions throughout the program, you can feel free to add them in the chat box as well. We will have time for Q&A later in the event. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's presentation. Dr. Victoria Steger has worked in government and higher education for over 20 years. She currently serves as the Chief Learning Officer for the Office of State Procurement, Department of General Services for the state of Maryland. There, she is responsible for the education, training, and certification programs for the entire state of Maryland for procurement and related areas. She is active in educational leadership, continuing education, workforce development, and human performance development. Prior to joining the state of Maryland, she worked in several positions in higher education over the last 2 decades, including as a university professor, director, dean, associate provost, and vice president. Victoria is a grant reviewer for the U.S. Department of Labor and U.S. Department of Education. She often serves as a grant writer and is a reviewing editor of 3 professional international journals. Victoria also serves on the Board of Examiners for the Universal Public Procurement Certification Council. Victoria holds both bachelor's and master's degrees in education and a PhD in instructional design, focusing on human performance improvement. So now I'm proud to turn it over to Dr. Steger. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Christy. When you send your bio, sometimes you're hoping they don't read the whole thing, but okay, I'm good with it. Thank you. That was a very gracious introduction, and thank you for having me today. This is a great opportunity to spread the word about the state of Maryland as a potential customer for your membership. So thank you for that. And thank you, Kim. Kim is driving our presentation this morning, so thank you for that as well. If you'll go to the next slide, Kim, I'll just keep going. Welcome to all of you who are with us today, and to anyone who follows on a recording as well. What we really want to go through is 3 key topics about who at the state, who procures products and services, how do we get them, and what is it that we're actually procuring, and who is the they? How do they procure? How do they do this? So next slide will tell us a little bit more. When we talk about the state, we really don't mean the state. There is no singular purchasing authority for the entire state. What we have are multiple organizations within the state. And if you've ever done business with any state, even a local government or the dreaded federal government contracts, you know they're by organizations, not just the state. So next, please, Kim. When we say the state, and so when I say the state, I really mean organizations, but let me share this graphic with you. This will tell you where we get the authority to purchase and who does it. So of course, the top lawmaker in the state is our state legislators. That is the General Assembly is the lawmakers. They make all of the rules, everything. We are unique in Maryland. And I'll say this now, I am not originally from Maryland. You may hear a bit of a Southern accent. I grew up in Arkansas and then lived in North Carolina. But my husband is from Prince George's County and graduated high school there back in the 1970s. And so he's a local, and we came home when I joined the state of Maryland about 18 months ago. But unique to Maryland then, so apologize for any funny words that I say or I mispronounce something. I'm trying. Unique to Maryland is this Board of Public Works. The Board of Public Works is comprised of our 3 top people in the state: the governor, the state treasurer, and the comptroller. The Board of Public Works, since the inception of the Maryland Constitution, has been held responsible, was created then, and is held responsible for all procurements in the state. And that includes, all procurements in the state. So what does that really mean? Let me give you a little bit underneath there, and then I'll sum it back up and make sure we're clear. There are basically 4 what we call control agencies. This is also designated by law. The Department of Transportation, the Department of General Services with the Office of State Procurement, the University of Maryland System, and then the State Treasurer's Office. So the Department of Transportation, this really applies mainly to funds where they use federal monies, state highway, aviation, port, motor vehicle. There's a lot of federal money that intermixes there. So they are a control agency for that part. They are not a control agency for things for their own office buildings or things like that. We are. Who we are is the Department of General Services and the Office of State Procurement. The Office of State Procurement is fairly new to the state of Maryland. Before October 1st of 2019, you would have found multiple control agencies listed there, many more. Department of IT, etc. There was the law, House Bill 1021 of 2017, as enrolled as Act 590, created a centralized procurement system in the state and a central office of state procurement. And that was located then, even though we have statewide authority and I would say not authority, responsibility, it is officed in the Department of General Services, which is great. We serve in the Office of State Procurement 19 executive departments or agencies. So Department of Human Services, Department of Health, etc. There are 12 coordinating offices, many in the governor's office themselves, and 59 independent agencies. We also coordinate reporting and other things for Department of Transportation, University System of Maryland, and the State Treasurer's Office. The State Treasurer's Office is a coordinating they're our bank. They are the control agency for all banking and financial related items. University System is independent. Please note, St. Mary's College and Morgan State, they have their own special rules that are carved out really. So Kim, if you go on, what does that really mean for you all? And why did I spend just a minute on it? I mentioned this bill. There's a link here to it if you wish to get. Except for procurement by any primary procurement act other than DGS, the CPO or the Chief Procurement Officer, who is my boss, his name is Robert Gleason, and that is a new position, did not exist in the state before. We were the only state that didn't have one. The other 49 do. They're not gone, they do. So we have one, it was effective October 1, 2019. A few months later, we had COVID. So we've been trying to create this new organization during the lockdown. So that's been an amazing opportunity. I'm not going to say challenges, I call them opportunities, right? Positive. The CPO, or our Chief Procurement Officer, is granted authority to delegate procurement to agencies based on their levels of expertise. And I'll go over that in a few minutes. But Kim, if you'll go to the next slide, please. We are governed in the state by 2 big pieces of, one is law, and that's a state finance and procurement article. It's called, there are 2 articles. Division 1 is general finance. Think of your general books in your business. Division 2 is general procurement law. And boy, is there a lot there. And you can certainly look this up. The Code of Maryland Regulations. So statutory is the law. Regulatory is where the Board of Public Works creates regulations that interpret and apply the law. It's our policies and procedures and things like that. The one that applies directly to procurement is Entitled 21. And yes, there are 20 other titles before it, and there's some afterwards. But 21 is a big, big, big one because, as you can imagine, the state buys a lot of stuff. If we'll go on to the next one. Why I mention all of this is that I hope that as you're wanting to or expanding your business with the state, you realize that we have a lot of tools that our agencies use, and most are determined by regulation or law. but they use these to procure purchases, to procure items, to purchase things. There are four ways, really, four big tools that we can use. The first one is there is law that requires us to use a few people or organizations called preferred providers, and we'll list those for you in a minute. Then we have statewide or master contracts, and many of you may be on those or in those or wanting to join some of those. Then we have something called an indefinite quantity contract, and the feds call it IDIQ, or indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery. Here in Maryland, we just take that indefinite delivery out and just call it indefinite quantity contract. And then agency-specific contracts, and those can be for any size, absolutely any size. Kim, if you go on to the next one, really. So what I want to tell you briefly is, because you're not a preferred provider, probably, is these are our three preferred providers. The first one is Maryland Correctional Enterprises. Yes, you may have thought it's the prison system. They do, as a part of their rehabilitation programs, they do workforce development to develop skills so that when folks are released back out, that they have an employable skill. In creating those skills, they actually create products and some things. And so it just makes sense that we would want to purchase those as the state to enable them to continue to do that workforce development and job skill creation. The other one is the Blind Industry and Services of Maryland. I think that's pretty straightforward. And then the other is a community service provider called Maryland Works. We have to look at them first for certain products. They do not have a huge wide range. And so we know we have, and you can look up as well, and you all can purchase from them as well. It is not limited to just us, but we have to start with our preferred providers. Next, Ms. Kim. After the preferred providers, or just to give you an example of what they offer, the correctional enterprises have things like furniture, promotional items, office supplies, BIDSM, as we call it, or the blind industries for the state of Maryland. They have cleaning supplies and goods, first aid, also some furniture. And then Maryland Works does services only. They don't have any products. They do janitorial and courier, and then that's all they provide. But again, these are service providers that we by state law are required to go to first. If their prices are too high, or if their prices are, or if they're not able to provide what the agency needs, we then look outside of them immediately and are granted a waiver. So next slide, Ms. Kim. We do have these things called statewide and master contracts. There are many, many, many of them, and we'll have some links later for you to be able to look them up to see if that's something you want to get on or involved with. These are products that before the Office of State Procurement, agencies got together and discussed and came up with a buying strategy. Now in the Office of State Procurement, we have a division that's dedicated to growing and increasing these as a way to not only increase competition, but to give additional opportunity to more businesses here in the state of Maryland. We are now responsible, the Office of State Procurement, under our Chief Procurement Officers, responsible for these contracts, but agencies purchase from them individually. We don't tell them what to buy. We basically give them catalogs and people to provide from. So next slide. So the next thing is, these are some of the things, just an example, some examples of statewide or master contracts. Everything from IT to office supplies, to law enforcement supplies and equipment, highway safety equipment, uniforms, copiers. There are many, many, many statewide contracts. And I would encourage you to, if you offer any of those things or would like to, it's a way to expand your business, please look at getting involved in that. I know we had a particularly eventful winter, I believe, and our salt supply got a little limited, and our statewide contractor had to reach out to other people to help fill in the gaps for some of the highways and major thoroughfares. And it was really because their trucks were iced in and snowed in places, and so they couldn't even get out to clear the road so other people could get out. So it was quite interesting. And that's not, I know interesting in business is not always good, so that's okay. Kim, if you'll go to the next slide. So I would encourage you to, at least if you're not on a master contract, but you see somebody you'd like to do business with who is on one, they generally outsource a lot and subcontract a lot. Indefinite quantity contracts, this is when our scope of work is not quite as crystal clear, right? We're not exactly sure how much we'll need. For example, salt for the roads. If we have a mild winter, we may not need as much. If we have a rough winter, maybe we may need adding much more to purchase. So again, these solicitations are all publicly advertised. They're all competitive, and they're multiple vendor awards. They're usually not a single vendor. We use it a lot for things like engineering services, construction, on-call services such as plumbing or HVAC, could be security, or it could be something after a natural disaster or something like that. Sandbag services or anything like that. So we have many, many indefinite quantity contracts, and they are very similar to, if you knew the federal IDIQ, or indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery. Next slide, Ms. Kim. So agency specific is where our Office of State Procurement, works with a user agency, Department of Health, Human Services, Veterans Affairs, military, etc. There's 70 some. And the 12 primary, the 59 others, and there's a lot of agencies and organizations, and they're looking to procure something specific for their agency. And this all goes through a formal contract process after the solicitation, which is very formal and publicly posted. And I'll go through that in just a moment with you. Next, Ms. Kim. We really, a lot of times, many contracts will call for a prime contractor. Think of it as we're rehabbing a building, we're doing something in multiple areas. The prime contractor is actually the person who has the contract with the state, and they're the only one who has to respond to contracts or requests or anything from the state. And they are required to follow our laws, our rules, or regulations. If they have subcontractors, which many, many, many do, they contract with the prime, not with the state, not with any agency here at all. Their relationship is with that prime contractor, and they follow the prime contractor's rules. It's up to the prime to know all the state ones and make sure they follow that as well. Next, please. Then it depends on the size of the contract or the size of the solicitation that went out that results in a contract, how those procurements are done. A small procurement in the state of Maryland goes anywhere from $0 to $50,000. And I know the first time I heard that, I thought $50,000 is a lot of money, and it is. On scale, though, the state spends around, I think DGS is responsible for around $4 billion a year. So really 50,000 is kind of small if you scale it with $4 billion a year. So a small procurement, there's three, according to regulation, three kinds. The category 1, the smallest ones, are $0 to $5,000. A category 2 are $5,000 to $15,000, and then $15,000 to $50,000 is a category 3. All using agencies, all state agencies are delegated to engage in all procurements on their own without anybody looking over their shoulder with them, up to $50,000. That's just a given. Next slide, please. But there are different ways that they can, through regulations, go through those. So in a category 1, they don't even have to, up to $5,000, they don't have to have competition. They don't have to advertise it, and they can purchase it using a purchase card, a state credit card. They can compete it if they wish, but they don't have to. A category 2, it's up to $15,000, 5 to 15. They have to get 2 quotes, but they don't have to advertise it. They can actually just call or email and get 2 quotes and then award it. You might begin to see this is when you really need to find out from our friends at the Governor's Office for Small Business and Small Minority and Women Business Affairs, excuse me. They have lists of procurement offices and contacts for you. And then category 3, these are purchases from 15 to 50. They do still only require 2 quotes, but they have to get it in writing, a bid of some sort. And that can be an email. It's not a formal. They do have to advertise it in our e-procurement system called EMA, and I'll go through that in a minute, called e-Maryland Marketplace Advantage, but only for 3 days. So a small procurement is to enable the state agencies to really get through and do things quickly. Purchases, yes. Okay, I was reading the note at the bottom going, I don't understand that. A small procurement doesn't have to be made by somebody called a procurement officer. It could be administrator. In our own office, our executive administrative assistant has the purchase card. She does all of those. So our own procurement officers, of which we have 50 some, they don't do any categories 1, 2, and 3. Procurement officers tend to do the larger ones. So in any agency or any office, it might be an administrator of some sort, a financial person, maybe. There are going to be several people who are able to make those purchases. So please don't limit yourself to procurement officers only when you're contacting states, agencies, and people like that. Next procurement, next slide, next procurement. There's another threshold, and this one's really quick, $50,001, and it has to come to us, unless we've delegated some of it back to them because they've proven they have the staff, and the staff has the knowledge, training, whatever, to handle larger procurements without us overseeing it. And that's law of what we can do and can't do. But anything 50,000 and over requires a little bit more, not 50,000 and over $50,000. Maryland doesn't say 50,000 and older. So it's not 49,999. It truly is 50,000. It's one of those things I keep saying wrong because I came from another system. So those have to go through, and the agency has to work with the Office of State Procurement. As you can imagine, coming from came from higher ed personally, but my husband owned a small business for years and years and years. That does slow down things a little bit. And I apologize, I turned one off, but not that one. So what that does is that involves our office. And if you go to the next slide, we'll tell you just a bit about what do we do. So we do the procurement itself, but we work with the agency. All procurements, $50,001, have to be advertised in our e-procurement system. The agency, they determine what it is they need. We're not going to say, well, you say you need computers, but we think you need iPads instead. I mean, we're just not, that's not our role. Our role maybe help clarify it, but they determine what they need. And then we manage the actual procurement. But it's the agency's budget. We don't have their budget money. So if you go forward a slide, there are really two common types of formal procurement. Prior to 2019, these were actually called the preferred procurement types. But in 2019, the legislature said, no, they're not preferred. We know there are other procurement types that might be better for the state, for the vendor, etc. But the two still very common are a competitive sealed bid and a competitive sealed proposal. And why we say sealed, the competitive part I think is pretty straightforward, but why we say sealed is no one else sees it. Your competitors will never see it. You can't see your competitors. If you won, great, you know you won, but you don't know what the other people bid or the other people put in their proposal. They're never made public. They're considered private. Who does see this is the people who are doing the evaluation, of course. But that otherwise it's not a public, we're not posting all the bids out on the, we're not posting the details of it. I'll tell you in a minute just a little bit more about what is public then. So a sealed bid, or a CSB, a competitive sealed bid, is submitted in response to an invitation for bid or an IFB. You'll see that acronym a lot in Maryland. This is typically always 100% awarded on minimum qualifications. Did you bid on the product we actually asked for, or a allowed substitution, etc.? Did you meet the, we said we needed 50 and you said, yeah, I could get you 50, or you said, no, I can only do 30. And we say, well, we said we had to have 50, so it doesn't qualify. We have to have 50. And then it's really on price. So is it the right product at the right, with the best price? This is a lot of times used for purchasing commodities, and commodities being anything from food for the prison to salt for the trucks, to gas, to police cars. It can be anything like that. Capital equipment, and by capital, that's, a larger investment, and construction work is off work, not services. The work is often bid this way. Competitive seal proposal is, we issue then something called a request for proposal. And this is awarded something called best value. And we evaluate two different things. We evaluate the technical proposal, or what you say you're going to provide and how you're going to provide it. And we have to rank those and evaluate those and make sure those are all qualified. We'll talk about that in a minute. But then and only then do they look at price. They're not allowed to even look at the prices until they decide what's the best solution that's been provided in this proposal. They cannot open the price without evaluating and ranking and looking at and making sure everybody's qualified. They, eliminate somebody who maybe one of the minimum qualifications was being in business for 5 years, and this business has only been in business 6 months. Well, they're eliminated because they didn't, and it was in the bid, it's in the proposal, the RFP. So once they do that, then and only then can they look at pricing. And they do not go always with the lowest price. It's the best value. Taking the best proposal, the best solution, the best services, whatever it is, along with the best or most reasonable, rational pricing. And a lot of times it's not going to be the lowest price because maybe we're getting a better value or something like that. But it's truly a judgment call, and it's based on value. And there's a lot of information in that request for proposal that'll tell you exactly how they're going to evaluate it, what they're looking for, and how important it is. This is always used, generally it says here, when purchasing its services, and also a combination of those commodities or products along with the services. So maybe we're purchasing a vehicle along with a service, 5 years of service with it. I'm making stuff up. I don't know if we do that. But in other words, if we're purchasing commodities, we generally don't go with an RFP. We do an IFB. But if we're purchasing services or services with commodities, that's generally an RFP. I can assure you, if you go into Emma right now and looked at it, you would find outliers, something that's different than what I just said. But this is in general. And Ms. Kim, if you go to the next one, please. The competitive seal bid or proposal process, there's really 8 steps. Internally is up to 1 and 2 are all internal to the state, to the agencies and the state office of state procurement. And that is specifications or specifics are written and reviewed and agreed upon about what it is they need, how much they need, when do they need, where do they need, etc. And the what. And then there's something called a procurement review group. That's a state group here. And they look at all sorts of what we call reserves and goals. These can be minority business goals, small business reserve goals, veteran business goals, etc. Those are done. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that, and there'll be some details a little later. But if you see proposals or bids that go out and you see that it has a small business reserve goal, or it is set aside for small businesses, or it has a minority business goal, it's because this internal review has taken place on every procurement, over $50,000. Then the solicitation is advertised in Emma. It's posted publicly, and you can find them. Anyone can with a web browser. If need be, or if necessary or applicable, there is a meeting before where you can ask the procurement officer and the agency questions, clarify things. Sometimes that means they're going to issue some clarification on the RFP or IFB, those 2 competitive sealed processes, and they do an amendment. In Emma, it's actually called a new round of the solicitation occurs. And that's to make sure that we close out the one that wasn't as clear as maybe it needed to be, and you only see the newest, latest, greatest corrected one. Oftentimes, you also get an extension on when the bids or the proposals are due. Then the vendors submit maybe questions. There's all sorts of stuff. They submit their packages. The procurement officer evaluates it, and then a contract is awarded. If the contract is for $200,001 or above, it has to be the OSP can approve 50 to 200,000. 200,000 and above must go to our Board of Public Works. And it is a publicly held meeting every approximately 2 weeks with the governor and or lieutenant governor if he needs a substitute, the treasurer, and the comptroller. They're all three in attendance, and they see all of these contract awards, recommendations, and they either approve or not them. As you can imagine, a lot of work has gone on beforehand to brief people to make sure they have everything they need to make an informed decision. But if you ever watch the meetings, sometimes there's some stuff that nobody was prepared for, and they'll defer it and say, go back and clarify something for us. They've asked about pricing when they see maybe a price increase on something. So they really get in deep in it, and they take it very seriously. Next slide, Kim, if you could. Thank you. But the using it, so we're going to go through just a bit of this detail, and really, Kim, we're going to go through the next 2 or 3 probably pretty quickly. The using agency is responsible for all the specifications. The Office of State Procurement does not do that. The little link there that you see, and Kim, don't click on it because we'd be in here forever. COMAR, the Code of Maryland Regulations related to procurement, is in 21, and then that's the actual regulation 4.1.3. That relates to specifications. So if you ever want to know more about how or why or what we do, if you think the way some specification is written is just flat wrong or inconsistent or something like that, always go to these regulations and look. If it's not there, we weren't required to do it that way. So you could ask for clarification or something like that easily. Next slide, please. Who is the Procurement Review Group? I told you I'd tell you a little bit more about this. This is an internal committee, and they place, and it's across the state, it's people from across the state, and of course we meet virtual. They place the Small Business Reserve, or they withdraw it. And MBE, the Minority Business Enterprise Goals, or the Veteran-owned Small Business Enterprise Goals. They look at 3 different things to make those determinations. And there's surveys that the state does to understand our own demographics. We know how many of each minority there are, and so we approximate using those demographics, right? How many minority businesses, if we have 47% of an Asian population, and yet we set a goal of 2%, then are we really representing that population with all of our contracts? Well, those are goals. Those are not, because you don't know for sure that there are a whole lot of businesses that have those minority ownerships. And remember, minority business and small business are 2 different things. Small business is based on the size of the business. It does not matter who owns it. It does not matter at all. It is based on the size of the business. Minority business, that doesn't matter the size. They can be a $30 million business, but they're owned by a representative minority as defined by the state. They can be a minority business. So minority business and small business goals are very separate, and they're kept that way. Veteran, it's just what it sounds like. A veteran of the U.S. military and or Coast Guard is the primary owner. Doesn't matter the size. It has to be owned 51% or greater by the veterans. But they're looking at 3 things. What is the scope of work or the products? Where is it located? And the number of vendors who are certified as small or minority or veteran that are actually available, registered in the state in that region. As you can imagine, there are some regions, maybe they're more rural, and we have smaller availability of some of those vendors, maybe not. But they look at those things and then they make a determination on that. Next slide. I won't go through the details on whether the potential is there and things like that, but these are some of the things that you can come back and look at if you want to get more into what the Procurement Review Group actually does. So next slide. Solicitations in eMaryland Marketplace Advantage, or emma.maryland.gov, or which is, you'll find the links from many different pages, DGS's homepage, the Office of State Procurement's homepage, but all solicitations that exceed $50,000 have to be published there. And remember, 15 to 50 also, but just for 3 days. So those are quick. You have to be pretty quick on the draw to find those, right? But the publication has to be at least 20 days prior to the bid submission date. When we teach procurement officers here to do this, we tell them 20 equals 30. as a kind of a rule, I think as kind of a guideline. I hate that expression, rule of thumb, but it's like that. It's a guideline. And the reason is, if you just do the bare minimum, which sometimes we're maybe in a hurry, maybe something has occurred and we need to buy more salt. We've had a rougher winter and we need to buy more salt. So we only going to put it out for 20 days, no more. It has to be published for 20 days, and those are calendar days, not business days. So those are calendar days. If it's published on the 1st, it can be due on the 21st. And please note that the due dates are often at a certain time. And so please make sure in Emma that you get them submitted before the time, because that is a computer and it will just turn it off. It doesn't care that you were like, well, we had a power outage in a certain area, so we're going to give them a couple more hours, unless the procurement officer changes that. And they can't change that unless they make an amendment to it. And that requires them to post it for another 20 days. It's just still due at 2 p.m. or whatever they put the time in as. So please, 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 always submit early, submit early. The federal bids, I used to tell people with grant applications, as a grant reviewer, 3 days early is the best idea. Because as you can imagine, the system bogs down if everybody's trying to upload something, especially big proposals, right on the same day, around the same last 2 hours before it's due. The system might go, ugh, and go. Or that's the one time in your life that your internet provider, somebody hits a tree down the street, knocks you out for a few hours. So, and you're racing over to Starbucks or somewhere to find Wi-Fi. So please, please, please think 3 days early. But we try to tell them minimum of 30, but law says 20. Next, please. A pre-bid or pre-proposal meeting is just what it sounds like. It is open to anybody interested in bidding or submitting a proposal. You can talk with the procurement staff and or project managers. You can ask questions and they will give clarification. Sometimes they may say, we have to go check on that. And then they provide the clarification in writing to everyone who attended. As you can imagine, they're all virtual now. With the exception of a few things, like maybe at the Port Authority construction, where there is still a physical walkthrough or a physical site visit. There may be those, but many of them are virtual and or a hybrid where you can come in if they want or if you want, but mostly they do them like we're doing this right now. But it's a two-way meeting. They're discussing it. They're taking questions. And that's been really effective and helpful. And I think we're going to continue with that even when we all get back to work fully at the state, which we hear is coming, but we don't know for sure. Yeah, let's hope the numbers keep going the way they're going. So you may have the walkthrough. You get to also, and this is why you always want to go, if you're a small business and you're looking to connect with primes. The primes will typically send 1 or 2 people. They will. But this is where they hope to meet small businesses, other businesses, that they can then even other primes, but they can do work together, and they can use as subcontractors as well. This is one of those, this is like, think of it as a speed dating opportunity. This is kind of a pre-bid meeting allows you to do that. We always schedule them for several hours, even though the real meeting's probably 1. We'll have another hour or 2 where a room is reserved or we're staying online so people can get together, exchange contact information, meet privately, etc. So these are really critical, not critical, but they're excellent opportunities. And I would advise you to take advantage of them, even if you're thinking, I'm really not that interested in this big proposal. But if you go, if you have an hour or 2 to go find out or log on and meet some other primes that maybe you can do other business with, it's an excellent opportunity to do that. It's kind of like, I know the chambers do these wonderful networking opportunities just for those things. This is just another version, an additional one, let's say. The next slide, Ms. Kim. So after that, at that, we're going to tell you, please, 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 please ask questions, please. But do it in writing. Now, at the bid or proposal conference, they will record the questions and the answers. They will. But if you have one and there wasn't a conference or a place email it in. Please email in your questions. Don't assume, because admittedly, Our procurement officers learn a lot about the areas they're working on large procurements in, but they're not experts. They're not subject matter experts. Many of them are actually lawyers. Many of our staff are lawyers. And so they have that kind of mind, but they may not know construction 100%. They may not know a recent regulatory change by the EPA. It has to do with the removing of certain plants or something. And anyhow, if you have questions, please contact them. Don't assume that if something's not clear in your mind, don't assume that it's clear in everybody else's. Let's say that. And again, stress the detail of the deadline. We're not joking. They will cut people off. And I can't tell you how many times they get an email and there's a terrible story about someone who was submitting it, and their machine restarted because there was a Windows update and they didn't get it submitted in time. And can they go ahead and submit it now? And we're like, sorry, no. And not trying to be cruel, but that gets into a deep, dark hole of really, and you just got to draw the lines. I will say Emma has only gone down once. It did for 1 hour before it was back up. And there were no deadlines during it. It was an overnight thing, but there were a lot of communications sent out to make sure that wasn't the one time when a small business owner was at home and sitting a bid, after work one evening, late at night, when a lot of us small business people, when my husband used to own one, that's when he would do that kind of paperwork, because during the day he was doing the work, right? So we did contact them, but when in doubt, ask questions, please. Next slide, Ms. Kim. Now, I think I'm kind of way behind. So the submissions are there. Let's go to the next one, Ms. Kim. Kristen warned me there was no way to get through this, but I do want to do a couple of things really quickly. And it's this slide, and then Kim, I may ask you to pop through to a couple of other ones. There's two things that people struggle with that we evaluate. When we're looking at a bid, or we're looking at the technical side of an RFP, we're looking for two things. First, is it responsive? In other words, did the vendor, submit something that met all the requirements? So if we said we have to have a minimum of 50 items and they said 30, it's not responsive. Or if they said 30 now and we can get 20 in 6 months, we're like, no, we said you had to have a minimum of 50. So, if they said 25 down, 25 in 6 months, then yeah, sure, that would have been responsive. But if they said 50 right now, no. So all the material aspects, all the minimum qualifications, all the requirements. The next thing they look at is responsible. This one's not quite as clearly defined. Responsible means that the responder, whoever the vendor is, actually has the capability to do what they said they do. If you're a startup business and you said, oh no, we can do this $35 million project, me and my 2 employees will hire a whole bunch of people real quick, and the owner just graduated college, but he's sure that they can handle it. We start stepping back and going, is this a good way to use the taxpayers' dollars? They look at things like Dun & Bradstreet reports, right? Whether they've been they pay their bills on time as reported to the Better Business Bureau and things like that. If you say you have a website, but when we go to it, it says 404. Not found, we go, and I'm not going to say it's a complete judgment call. There are things they look at, the Dun & Bradstreet and some other reports that are really accurate. Or have there been previous contracts with the state that have been canceled because they couldn't complete them? So really, make sure you say you can do what you say you can do, and you're fine. But those are the two keys. The other thing I really wanted to hit is, let me get down to it. Yes, it's slide 34, which is, I'm sorry. Let's go to bid evaluation, which is 32, I believe. 31, I can't even see. It's probably the next thing. It is. Okay, thank you. So if you go to the next one, Kim, I'm sorry. They're right here together. It's the bid evaluation. This is the stuff. So responsiveness, there you go, responsibility, next slide. We should be talking about bid evaluation. We absolutely have to look at, are you registered to do business in the state of Maryland? You don't have to be from the state, but we prefer, but you have to be registered at least. Are you licensed? If you say you're a plumber and we require a licensed plumber, but the plumbing licensing people say, no, you're not licensed, we're going to go, what? And say, well, show us. Maybe there's a typo, but prove it to us. Show us a copy of your license. Are you in good standing with SDAT, or the State Department of Assessments and Taxations? Are you not? Did you pay your taxes? And for small business reserve procurements, are they registered as a small business in Maryland? If you're registered as a small business in another state, including as a federal, that doesn't count. You have to self-certify. It is self-certified. It's done through Emma. So it's online, it's quick, but you have to be registered in the state of Maryland. We don't have a law that allows us to reciprocate other states or federal small business certifications. And even if you think, well, I've never needed this, I would advise it because the governor, if you qualify, the governor issued an executive order a few months ago that our small business reserve requirement used to be up to the $50,000. Now it's up to $500,000. So all purchases up to $500,000 have to be held aside for small businesses unless there is a waiver granted because there aren't any small businesses that do something or etc. But he issued that executive order. It is still in place. So it's not just $50,000 for small business mandatory set aside. It's always been $100,000 in construction for small business set asides, but now it's $500,000 for all set aside. So if you qualify as a small business, please, please, please register and do that. And then we talked about the approvals. Let's go to the contract. The next slide, please. I think we'll make it through these. Yes. Yeah. You may be required to meet some bonding requirements, bid bonds, payment bonds, and performance bonds. Those are going to be listed in the solicitation in that procurement. So please really, really look at those. Also, do you have any required product and service warranties? The general conditions for construction contracts is standard. So that's specific to construction. Those don't change, but they in the solicitation would often put just that and a link to it, like you see here. They won't spell them out. So please read those things and make sure you're good with them, that you will do that. The worst thing is we have to negotiate later, right? And we don't negotiate on terms and conditions because that requires us to change a law. And that takes the state legislature, and they only meet once a year for a few months. And so it'll take us 2 years, once to find out about it, then another year to get them to do the law change, if there is one, if they will. And then it usually doesn't come into effect for a year after that. So please don't think you're going to negotiate terms and conditions, because we don't. It's just not something we do. The next slide, ma'am. During a bid, rate. If you have a service contract with the state, you have to guarantee and provide data that you pay your employees what is considered living wages. These are above minimum, typically. And then there's something called the prevailing wage, and that's on construction contracts only. So please be familiar with those if you do any kind of service or construction. Also, we mentioned the preferred providers. Remember, the preferred providers, other than NCE, they make a lot of their own stuff, but they also, if they resell something, they have to buy it from somebody. So you can be a provider to them, by the way. But there's also a clause called Buy American Steel. So especially for construction and related, and green purchasing. Those are getting a lot more, not bite to them, but they're getting stronger. The regulations there with green purchasing and the requirements. For example, polystyrene is outlawed in the state as of July 1st last year, which means that's why you don't get those takeout containers that are that foamy white stuff. You can't use those anymore. So there's a lot of things related to green purchasing in there. So please check those out. And then the next slide, we'll talk just briefly about the actual bid evaluation. If there are any past performance requirements, please make sure you address those. Those will eliminate you as responsive quickly. And this is where we see challenges. A service contract might require the bidder submit a minimum of 3 references that reference 3 different complete successful years of service within the last 10 years. So if you had a reference that says, 1 year, and then another reference says 3 years later, no, we need 3 consecutive. And you're thinking, what in the world would that matter? But as a business owner or business people yourselves, businesses do have up and downs, but what we're looking for is a business that opens and then closes and then opens and then closes and opens and, some things like that maybe. So again, read those requirements. I'm not saying that is a requirement. That's just an example. That could be one. Did you require the minimum number of references? Can we contact them? How many times do somebody provide a reference and their phone number and email address don't work? Don't. Talk to your references first. Make sure you got their latest, greatest number and that they're going to be a positive reference. The last thing you want to do is provide a reference and it's somebody who says to your face, or maybe you think they like you, but actually they're not going to give you a good reference. So do talk to them, please. And you say, that sounds silly. People wouldn't do that. Yes, they do. I hear so many stories. I don't do procurements. I'm the chief learning officer. But as we're doing training, it's my job making sure people follow the rules and know how to do good at this. How many times do I hear, all their references are out of business? Doesn't look good towards responsive, but also towards responsibility as well. The next slide, please. On the contract award, again, it has to be to a responsive and responsible. And then it's based on, if they're both, based on total bid price. A request for proposal is awarded to the total best value, and it may not always be the lowest price. Next slide. And we briefly chatted about approvals, but remember, anything over $200,000 and anything under $200,000, but it has bonds in it. So it still may have to go to the Board of Public Works because there's a bond requirement in there. Think construction maybe, or something like that. Again, there's the link to the Board of Public Works. They generally meet twice a month, but in August, there's only 1 meeting. So sometimes getting to the BPW might add a couple weeks or a month to getting your contract issued, just FYI. The next slide will tell you, organizations purchase the products we need, but if they have the money. So I'll leave that there. Next slide, please. They may need new carpet in some place, but they don't have budget for that, so too bad. It's just like any business. You may want to have something. You may want a brand new truck for your construction business, but if you don't have the money, you're not buying it. States the same way. Buyers are people who can make purchases on their organization. They're generally in small procurement only, up to $50,000 or through $50,000, and they're generally paid through some sort of an invoice that you issue us and we pay from the comptroller's office, or a purchase card, which is a state credit card. The procurement officers, they engage on behalf of an organization, and they can do small procurements. They can, but generally they only do the 50,000 and up, and especially the 200,000s and up. The next slide, a little bit of a summary now, which is, remember, the state's not just a single entity. It's lots of departments and offices and agencies. And there's some resources here at the end that will give you to a website that will point you to all of those, so you don't have to go find them on your own. The buying organization has to have a need. It can only be needed to fulfill their mission. They also have to have the money for it. It may sound silly, but boy, howdy, sometimes you may know somebody in an organization and you may say, I can provide da-da-da-da-da. I could see that you need it. The problem is they just don't have the budget money to do it. So approaching organizations with a great idea, never a bad thing. Just remember, if they don't have the budget money or the approval to use that budget money, they just can't do it. It's not that they don't need it or want it, they just can't. And then last, please remember, to the next slide, look at all of the socioeconomic programs, including those for small minority women and veteran-owned businesses. That's the next slide. And then the next slide after that has some links in it. This Email Marketplace Advantage, Emma, there's the link for it. It is emma.maryland.gov also, but you can become a Small Business Reserve certified business right there inside of Emma as a new vendor. If you go to the next slide, the Small Business Reserve, we've talked about what all that does, so let's go on to the next one. The Minority Business Enterprise Program. Right now, I'll give you an insider tip, but right now, you go to this link. The Maryland Department of Transportation, by legislation, statute, is the authority who manages this program. This is decades old legislation. Nobody knows why it was moved to MDOT, but it was. And so MDOT, our Department of Transportation, actually has the Office of Minority Business Enterprise. And they are where you apply for and where you find who are minority businesses. They have the searchable database. That will, insider scoop, that will be moving into Emma in the fall, is the plan. Now, plans change, but that's the plan. So just like you could certify as an SBR, a small business, you could certify as a minority as well. And we're trying to become one-stop shopping, right? A little more Amazon-like. Next slide, please. The veteran-owned program, again, in Emma, absolutely. But we do recognize the U.S. Department's Veteran Affairs Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. If you're certified through there, Maryland does have a law that requires and that allows us to recognize that. So that's great. Next slide. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize how many I had left in 2 minutes. There's just some benefit slides in there. If you go to the last one, Kim, it's like 4 or 5 down. These are the different slides at the end, we'll tell you. And the last one here is Emma. Oh, one back. Emma is our Email Marketplace Advantage. And these are links for some of the training that's available for vendors. These quick reference guides are really step-by-step to get you through process guides for vendors, as well as for our internal people. We have information, we have training videos for you now. And this is stuff this is my responsibility. This is all my mess. The FAQs are not, by the way. So if you have a problem with those, you can let me know, but I got to ask somebody else for those. And then we have these videos also on something called the Emma Video Help Desk. So these are links for you as vendors that will help with using Emma and with submitting bids to the state. And hopefully, I've got 1 minute to spare. We can go to questions, Kim, to the last slide. I made it. I almost got them all in. I got to tell Kristen, it's almost available.
Great job. I know that was a lot of information to cover quickly. We do have time for a couple questions if anybody would like to unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask. We will be, after the presentation, sharing the slides as well as a recording to the video along with Dr. Steger's information. So if you have any questions that come to you later, you're welcome to reach out to one of us and we'll be sure to help you.
One question I'd have for Dr. Steger is, first of all, thank you for the information. It's great. It's almost overwhelming. I wonder.
Sorry.
If we have it's wonderful. It really put in perspective a number of situations I've had in the past. And I was wondering, if businesses have questions, is there? Obviously, they can go to oftentimes there's a resource with regards to the RFP. Is there a sort of general area where you can get answers on how things are being procured, I guess I'd say, given all the legal nuance and everything that you mentioned?
Right. A lot of, and so there's the easy answer, right, would be if I guess actually, Kim, is it possible to go back to the slide? I think it's like the third from the end, or fourth from the end, resources. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, it's 46. I apologize. I'm asking her like 3 more back. And it should say resources to there. So in this PowerPoint that you'll be getting, these are some of the places that you'll, let's see, one more. I think it says it's 46. One more forward. Oh, another forward. 2 or 3 more forward. Sorry, I had you go too far back. I apologize. It'll say resources at the top and be a globe. One more forward, please, or 2. 1 more, 2 more, 1 more. There we go. Sorry. This is one of the, as you see, there's a lot of links in here. There's a statewide agency directory, and you can get specific agency information from that directory. We have what are called business liaisons here. And I think a lot of what you're maybe asking about might be there. There are small business liaisons, and then there are minority business liaisons. Now, if you're a large business and you call one of these guys, they'll still talk to you. If you talk to the small people, they're not going to not talk to you, but they are more informed on small business stuff. But maybe you're a large business and you're looking to find more subcontractors to work with you. You know, your small business liaison can help with that. But really, if you're a small business and or a minority business, these liaisons are very, very helpful. And if you go forward one more slide, continuing through, Kim, please. There's also the Statewide Transparency, and this is a downloaded report of what we bought and when and from whom. So you know, it's right there. Now it's dated because it's a year-long report. I will tell you that Emma launched in July of 19, and then, well, COVID, but it's being rolled out in phases. Emma is a complete secured, procure to pay. So eventually vendors will be able to see this spend transparency immediately, because you just search on a commodity and it'll give you a report, which is wonderful. But you also have lovely networking events, which you guys have here. But if you go forward one more, let's see, there's the Emma training resources. Well, you can learn more about Emma there as well. And then there's buried in here somewhere, there's a link to our friends at the Governor's Office for Small Minority and Women Business Affairs, or GOSBA, G-O-S-B-A is their acronym. And they have, they provide training programs and their webinars now, as well as they have a lot of information and programs on how to get in touch with procurement people and just ask them questions. You don't have to be, and they have links, phone numbers, email addresses, names, etc. for different ones at different agencies. There's also contact information on our website, which is procurement.maryland.gov, and contact information there. I would say reach out. My boss, our chief procurement officer, if you look on the web, you find his direct phone number, email, and I think his cell phone number is even published. And we do talk to vendors. We do answer questions. We can't about any one specific procurement, of course, but we do talk about things that, you know, we're glad to do it as much as we can. And we hope as the state and the country opens up more, we'll be able to do more things like our chamber, our central chamber here did, which is have more sessions like this, but potentially maybe focus in on specific areas or something like that. And we've just not been able to do it for the last year or so or more. And I've only been with the state 18 months. My position is brand new. There was no one who was in charge of training for procurement at all in the state prior. So we got a new chief procurement officer. We got a new chief learning officer. And well, I hadn't even gotten to hire staff before we had a hiring freeze. And I'm hearing rumor, I'm crossing my fingers, we're going to go ahead and be able to hire a couple people. Budget didn't turn out quite as bad as we were fearing because of COVID. So they were already budgeted. We just froze them. So now we're hopefully in July getting to unfreeze. I hope I gave you some answers, but I think if I'm guessing right, what you would love to see is a resource page where a lot of this is explained maybe in short videos or in some sort of a guide. And I can tell you today, In fact, I do have some staff, by the way. I have a technical writer that is working on a vendor handbook. So we're getting there, and it's our first draft. So it'll be going out in the next month or so. It'll be posted. We'll share it with everyone in every place we can. And then we're going to ask for a lot of feedback. What else would you like to see in here? What didn't we explain or give you information about? So that's a little preview of something that's coming, and we have somebody personally working on it right now. I reviewed it with her yesterday, the draft. So yeah. Sorry,
we'll make sure to stay in touch.
That was a long answer.
No, that's great. We'll make sure to stay in touch with you and get a copy of that draft and share it with everybody who attended today. Are there any?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions? I know we ran a little over, but that's okay. Okay. If not, thank you again for joining us today, everyone. It's been a great session, and we hope you'll tune in for some of our future webinars, and our schedule can be found on our website at centralmarylandchamber.org. A quick reminder, our chamber golf tournament is next week. We'll be at Turf Valley Resort on the 15th. If you're interested in coming out to golf with us, reach out to one of our staff members, or you can register online. And lastly, thank you again to Dr. Victoria Steger for such a great informative presentation. And I also wanted to thank our Regional Economic Development Committee, chaired by Jonathan Williams from Real Projectives, for bringing great topics and events like this to our membership. So we hope to see you all soon, and have a great day.